What is up and what's going on, good people? Before we get into this, discussing, discussing what's going on in Florida about slavery and how it's some things changing in the curriculum. They're bringing up the not so bad parts of slavery, and I ripped the quote that got Pearl in all that trouble, slavery being exaggerated. I put that in the title because that's how one could interpret this whole little thing. So we're going to get into it. Before I get going, I was fumbling on the start off because I was looking for this right here, as far as them talking about slavery as if it wasn't quite as bad. It just reminded me of this.
I said your name is Toby.
Kunta Kinte. Damn, Steve. What'd I say about hitting so hard, man?
I'm sorry, are you all right?
You sorry? I'ma show you sorry, man. I'ma show you sorry, bro.
Oh man, that was a classic. That was a classic. Before we get all the way into it, before we even roll the intro, shout out, special thanks and acknowledgement to Machismo TV.
Welcome to Machismo TV, the ultimate destination for modern men seeking to upgrade their lifestyle. Subscribe to Machismo TV and Saul T-Balls. We stream daily from 12 midnight to 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the best male-centric content. Highlight reels without reviewing or providing any editorial bias to the content. We have done so much, with so little for so long, we are now qualified to do anything, with nothing.
Shout out to everybody in the building. We about to get into it. I just saw Hood Servative in there. Said he will be up in a minute. We about to get on into this thing. So let's strap on in. Let's get ready to go. Let's get.
Peace, folks. This is X from TPOT Media. Open your mind and wake your black ass up. You know what time it is. Hit that damn like button as you make your way in the door. Grab a seat, settle in, get ready. It's the Grown Man Hour with your host, my man, Bernard Riley. All right. Let's get on into it. Shout out to everybody in the building. Shout out to the early bird squad that comes in bright and early before we even get things all the way officially started here. Hopefully the audio is good. Shout out to the Clue channel, says slavery was exaggerated, quit playing. You left the T off of there, but cool. Hoop Jargon Media Network in the building says let's get it. Dreddy Bean in the building says yo. Chris G in the building says hit the like button. Absolutely. JC the Conqueror, who I think just became a Patreon. I think that's you. It says JC. I don't know if it's you. I have to double check, but that will be acknowledged on the screen. Holding my nuts, says BR time. Absolutely. Running late. Can't start a show to save my life. The standard RLC in the building says early bird, absolutely. Dolomite in the building says this is a car bomb conversation. They'll definitely set the pro-blacks off. Yeah. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. See, I have my view of that time period. I remember something happened on my show. Not well, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it popped out in my it popped out to me because it reminded me of how I think of things. We were talking about how HBCUs, the first HBCUs were were started during slavery. Like 1837 was the first one. And it was 3 more after that happened before before the Civil War and before, slavery was abolished and the whole works. And my knee-jerk reaction, and I feel very ignorant in the way that I just knee-jerk react. So slaves was going to college, but it's like, it's like, so that time, and like, I won't go as far to say slavery was exaggerated. It was certainly bad, but there were things going on in that time that we don't know about. Like there were free black people that were doing stuff. And I don't like that history doesn't teach that. I would like to know more about them. I would like to know more about black people from that time other than they were just slaves. So that part of it I don't like. Very interesting thing that I never would have learned unless without for this space, I would have never learned that the first actual legal above board actual slave owner was actually a black man, and I think the person that he got papers on was white. I think he owned a white person. There's some small details in there that I'm just like, this is interesting. Hood Conservative will come up and correct me on that. I'm going to ask him about the guy. I think his name was Anthony Johnson. I'm going to ask Hood Conservative on that. So it's like, it's so much stuff that we don't know. Now, I don't take the stance that, it wasn't as bad. But I am of the view that there's aspects of history in that time involving black people that we don't know, that we just don't know about. You got to go digging to find it. And so it's like the irony in that before I bring Hood Conservative up and pass it to him. The irony in that is that they talk a lot about how Florida and Ron DeSantis is trying to whitewash history or delete our history. But the fact of the matter is there's aspects of it that's already deleted, erased, that we don't care about. And then when people start talking about those things, a lot of black people will say, no, don't bring that up. We want 100% downtrodden narrative. But it's a lot more stuff out there. And I do give black people credit, even though I think some of them are coming from a place of maybe not even being historically accurate, but there are black people that are talking about how, hey, we was already here. I don't know if we was the original Jews or if we were the original American Indians. Niggas is making up history, it seems. But I don't know which is which. but there is a small groundswell of people talking about free black people walking around, in the 1800s. Even in the movie that we saw, 12 Years a Slave, well, how was he captured and taken away from his family and thrown into slavery? So you're telling me this free man that's telling us this free man was just walking around in the South free doing business. It's like we don't even process that. But we're gonna go to Hood Conservative to help us make all of this make sense. What is going on? Welcome aboard.
Hey, good morning, man. Sorry I'm late. I was actually up early and I fell back to sleep. And it was
Yeah.
good sleep. It was like that emancipation sleep. I wonder how slaves slept the day after the Civil War ended. Like, did all the slaves just sleep till like 2 o'clock the next day? Like, woo, shit.
And niggas still sleeping in to this day. God damn it.
God damn.
That sleep was
But
so good. That sleep was so good after slavery. We still can't get up in the morning. God damn, boy.
for
We
real,
enjoying
like, and now, and you tricked me this morning too, man. You damn near started on time. I was counting on you to be late. Like, I had actually set my alarm for 11:15 this morning just to make sure I was right on time with you. And you come in at 11 o'clock. What the hell, bro?
I wasn't exactly on time at 11, but I didn't make it to 11:15 though. I initially set it at 10:45. So even if I started right at 11, I still was late. I still had to adjust it. But either way it goes, we in here. We in here. Shout out to everybody in the building. Shout out to everybody in the building. But
Yo, I
uh,
forgot. I know I sent you a bunch of different kind of clips because a lot of people are losing their mind over this thing, and I think I pitched the idea to you, and we didn't really get a chance to speak too much in the back chat till just now. But when I pitched the idea to you, obviously a lot of what I do or say is like a tongue in cheek kind of thing, and so I think there is a reality to the bill that probably makes a little bit of sense, but then there's the Kamala Harris narrative of what's going on that is just completely ridiculous. And it does sort of whether or not you guys agree or disagree with the actual bill in Florida, I think it does raise an interesting argument. And this is a point that I've brought up a whole lot over the years in this space when it comes to like Black people's place in this country, because they're basically making the argument, and this is a little bit much. This is kind of this is a lot of argument to make, right? But you niggas was better off slaves here than anywhere else. Because remember, it's not like the white man just captured Black people and threw them boat. That was a very rare instance. So for the most part, the white man just pulled up to the Walmart of slavery, which is Africa, and they were met with slaves for sale. And so it's like, well, you realize what would have happened to you had you not got on that boat, right? Like, do you understand that your genetics died on that beach had you not got on that boat? And you
explain
got
that.
to
What do you
learn how to
mean?
be a Black. Well, I mean, cuz where were you gonna? Where would you go had the white man not bought you on that beach in Africa?
Okay, then I would assume that had they not. Okay, so if they were sold into slavery, they were probably already slaves. That we agreed. That's about accurate.
Agreed. That's how you become a slave, because you got captured in war for the most part, or you just got captured on the humble. Like, that was like Kunta Kinte and Roots, right? He was just out for a stroll to the watering hole, just looking at the buffalo and shit go by, and next thing you know, a white man jumped out the bush and took him away. For
So
the
I
most
think what
part,
you're
you lost the war.
so I think more or less what you're getting at is that the the person who carried the genetic material that ultimately led through an unbroken chain to you, that individual was already a slave. So he either was going to be a slave in Africa or a slave in on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere, give or take, depending on where they landed. So what you're basically saying is, would you want the white man slavery or the Black man slavery? Those were the options. That what you're getting at?
Yes, yes. That's a very rough summation of it. So, because here's the thing, right? What do you do with excess merchandise you can't move? Even if they're
Um,
people, even if they're women
what?
and children, what do you do with excess merchandise you can't move?
Well, you discard of it, but why? Or you sell it really cheap, or you. I guess I
Sacrifice it
guess I
to your
don't.
God.
Why do
You
we?
can
Why?
you
Hold on,
can
wait. Why?
have
Why? Why?
you can have a cannibal orgy. I mean, a cannibal feast.
Oh shit! Come on now. But
I mean, listen, we're talking about a time and
all right.
place where very horrible things happened on a regular basis, and you do not want to get into some of the first-hand written accounts of what the white man saw as he became friends with Africans.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that. That's another thing that don't get talked about that much. About Africa was the Garden of Eden. That's how we view it. But no, it was some brutal shit going on in Africa. So in other words, and I guess the part that I got confused about when you said, what do you do with expendable? What did you call them? The slaves.
No, I just said, what do you do with merchandise that you can't move?
I mean, yeah, okay. So they sold that merchandise that was, I guess, working for them and producing things. They sold it for products, which is stupid to say that you're going to sell something that produces products for products. You could just have this person just keep producing. So that it may not have been a good business move, but either way, they yeah, I would assume if they couldn't sell that person, whatever benefit they were bringing as a slave, they would keep them as a slave. It's like a slave owner in America. If he wanted to sell a slave and he couldn't sell it, then he's just going to have him continue to pick cotton, right? So that's why I was just saying.
So they had great agricultural projects in Africa at the time, is what you're saying. Like America was growing cotton and Africa was growing what at the time?
Good question. I
right.
have no
That's
idea.
What I'm saying.
I have no idea what their damn it. So okay, so what was Africa doing with their slaves? Were they putting them to work to produce something meaningful? I'm pretty sure they went there just to say you just a slave and I own you, nigga. So they had to be producing something.
Like
Yay,
what?
nay?
Dungarees?
I don't know.
Like what? Did they start a spear and shield industry? Like what did they produce?
They should have had, yes, they should have had them making the best spears on the yeah. They should have had them making spears or doing so. Then again, I don't know. I don't know, but anyway,
this is why people are mad at Ron DeSantis, because he's raising this uncomfortable type of conversation. But good, I'm sorry.
No, I get it, and I like those uncomfortable conversations. I like digging deep into just aspects of Black history that don't get talked about. And one thing that I was talking about when I was rambling before you came up, and I think you touched on this when you mentioned when you did like the little, I guess I'll call it the pre-show to this show. You were basically talking about giving some of your preliminary thoughts on this topic with Ron DeSantis, I guess changing the curriculum in school as far as history and as far as slavery, as far as Black history, and the things that will be added on there. And you had pointed out that Anthony Johnson was the first actual slave owner, the first legal above board, he was the first slave owner, and he had to go to court to fight for the right to own this person. And Anthony Johnson was Black, and I think I gathered that you said the person that he owned, the first person that he owned, was that person that he wasn't white, was he?
Well, the person at the center of this court case wasn't white, but he did have white slaves, yes. But you have to understand, at this time, the official term for that capacity of labor was the indentured servant. So
right,
he had
now,
a white indentured servant. We would think of it as a slave, though. Let's keep it above.
I know, but like, wasn't he the one that won the first case to make it to where this person was going to be a slave?
Yeah,
for
you're
life?
right about that.
Yeah, so that's what really made slavery. That's what made slavery, as far as how we try to separate it or make a distinction in America. I don't even know if this is true, but we always say that in America it was unique because it wasn't over a period of time. It was for life, and then it eventually became based off race. And so, but Anthony Johnson, I think he was the first person who legally above board got it to where
this person is my property for life. Is that about accurate?
I think the significance of it is that it was the actual legal demarcation of race-based lifelong slavery. So we can take these Africans in particular and make them slaves for life. That was the legal demarcation of that concept.
Okay. And that's something that we would never know about. And I guess, and I'm getting in the mind of the people who wouldn't want that to be taught. And I think I think the logic behind it is that would take the sting of the atrocity and the burden off of, you know, white people in this country, and just the narrative of black, like they don't want nothing to truly take away from that. You know, it's almost like anything, even if it's a small detail that don't change a thing, because that's what I'm going to get into when we start talking about you know, the things that they're trying to include in there. You know, they're including things like, you know, slaves, you know, acquired skills, and then they use those skills to benefit them, or we could have been used to buy their freedom in some kind of way. You know, they want to include stuff like that in there, stuff that I think we kind of already knew. And my position is, it doesn't change the brutality of slavery. It's just another layer to it, but that extra layer in the minds of a lot of people basically is a roundabout, long-winded way to try to take the historical atrocity that was committed largely by white people in that time. Is that it's to let them off the hook. So any speaking of any details, any interesting, you know, details or things that slaves did or black people did back then, it makes white people look less evil. And so it seems like there's an invested interest somewhere to where we can't do nothing to take them off the hook. So we can't even talk about, you know, things, and, you know, things that black people were doing that were not slaves back then, like, you know, the HBCUs that were built back then. It's like, so it turns into a thing to where it's like slavery, yes, it was still every bit as bad, but there was other stuff going on that there's invested interest in just not talking about. And I like to know about that shit. So I think that's where the conversation kind of starts for me, and then it can segue into, well, you got to question. Then you know, it's the questioning of the ulterior motives and agendas as to why as to what, you know, why DeSantis is doing what he's doing. Because there's some white people who probably view this differently or look at it in some type of way, or they feel like, you know, like, yeah, stop, you know, stop taking the shit on my people. You know, it's like there's some white people that feel that way. So it's like it turns into a situation where the only thing that's happening here is people are just questioning motives. If you understand what I'm saying.
I have no problem with that. I mean, why would you want your people to constantly be lied on if you can actually prove, hey, these are kind of lies? Like, y'all been telling these horrible lies about us for a long time. You know, it was bad enough. The time period that you're talking about, everything was bad enough, and you're gonna take that bad enough time and then go lie on it on us on top of the bad enough. Like, come on, let's
Right,
pull back a little bit here.
Where are they lying? Where's the white man being lied on?
Well, I'm not saying that everything is a lie, but I'm sort of making the just Pearly sort of argument where it's like, listen, slavery was bad enough, but you think they just whipped their slaves 24/7 all day? I invested in this product that's supposed to make me money, so I can beat it until it doesn't make me money anymore. Like there's a weird narrative thing going on that black people I don't want to say we engage in directly. I think Hollywood, for the most part, gives everyone our shared image of what slavery was, and then there is the actual practical day to day knowledge of what slavery was that you have to dig into like the source material to find. So this is where you learn about the countless black slave owners across the country, or even the prolific black slave breeders. And it's like, well, if the white man is inherently evil for engaging in this practice, what does that say about us? Because the best of us apparently engaged in this practice when we could.
Yeah, yeah, slavery was everywhere, and I think in America, it doesn't. It's not an acceptable argument for most people to say, "Hey, it was bad. It was everywhere at that time. America wasn't that unique." The reason that argument don't work for a lot of black people because they, the term, the concept that I'm sure you've heard plenty of times, the legacy of slavery. You know, we're still living in, the aftermath of it. Any discrepancy that we see between black and white is rooted back to slavery. So in a real sense, to a lot of people, we have not climbed out all the way out of it yet, and that's how people are going to view it. And I think that's sort of at the core of when DeSantis, I think he's legitimately pushing back against. That's one thing I want to talk about too. How he's legitimately pushing back against wokeness. He is legitimately doing that, but there's an aspect of it. At least coming from his critics, where they're like, no, you're trying to wash this thing away. You're trying to make it not look as bad. You're trying to make it. You're doing what you can to try to massage all of the atrocity out of it, and let's just say, oh, let's just wash our hands. It happened. It's happened. Okay, we're done. Let's walk forward. And like they don't want to do that, so they're just viewing him as just this evil man with some ridiculous agenda beyond just fighting back at wokeness, if you understand what I'm saying, But
well, really quick before, and I know we got clips that we should get to, but I want to make this point to address.
Go ahead.
To address what you were just saying, I don't think this is what the hard stance looks like. I think this is like, listen, I don't want to keep looking like the evil monster kind of stance. The hard stance is you niggas deserve to be slaves and you should be lucky you're not slaves now. Like, that's the hard stance. If white people have to take account for being essentially the winners of history, why don't black people have to take account for being the losers? I mean, why since when does the guy who dominates on the field have to apologize to the people he dominated on the field? Like, that's the fucking hard stance. So until you get that, I'm not really trying to buy that, oh, the white man is trying to do something nefarious. Like, no. You haven't seen nefarious, because it's been a long time since black people have been in chains. So apparently we don't know what bad is.
Right. So the steel man position of the white person who's for this is like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being looked at like this evil monster. I wasn't around back then. I didn't do none of that shit. We got to stop teaching this in a context that makes white people to this day look evil. I remember I talked about how my son came back from, I guess, a normal lesson in school, saying some things about white people that it was. He came home and said some of the most racist shit imaginable about white people. Something happened. I don't know. I forgot what happened. I think a black person that did something to a white person, and he was like, "Well, so what? They did that to us, and that. So I don't even care what happened to him." It was like, whoa, this man, this innocent man who was killed. Like you don't care. They did that to us. It's like, so I think that's the steel man version of the argument, where some white people are saying that, nah, we not about to we not about to be the villains going forward.
You know, that's I think that's their stillman version of the argument why they want to tone down aspects of it. I think that's what it is. So, but let's get into the clips. Let's get into the clips. Let's see what we got here. Shout out to everybody in the building. Make sure you hit the like button. Let's go. Let's get it.
He's expanding his war on woke and taking on Bud Light directly. He's threatening legal action against Anheuser-Busch over its social media promotion with a transgender influencer. The Instagram video sparked enormous conservative outrage and backlash.
Wait, hold on. I don't know. Well, I think they're about to talk about I don't know why they're talking about the Bud Light shit. I think they talk about the shit that just happened next, where there's some changes in the curriculum.
Bud Light sales plummeting.
In a letter to Florida's pension fund manager obtained by CNN, DeSantis suggests that the beer company breached its legal duties to its shareholders.
Board has been doing, putting into place one of the
legislator there. So this is part of the ongoing trips over the course of the summer that the vice president has made to
could be applied for their personal benefit.
Okay, here we go.
To those efforts by the school board, adding a last-minute trip to Jacksonville to results of that over the course of this week when it comes to what the school board has been doing, putting into place one of the laws that DeSantis helped shepherd through. And new this morning, Vice President Kamala Harris will be responding to those efforts by the school board, adding a last-minute trip to Jacksonville to her itinerary today. It is in direct response to the state's newly approved standards for teaching Black history. One of the requirements for middle school students is to include, quote, how slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Harris forcefully condemned that new curriculum on Thursday.
Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
Now, one thing, man, see, this is where it gets annoying because, you know, if there's solid, to the extent that there's solid arguments against what DeSantis is doing, I like to see people argue it legitimately. The guy on the news quoted it directly. The guy on the news quoted it exactly like it was, exactly like it's written.
When it comes to what the school board has been doing, putting into place one of the laws that DeSantis helped shepherd through. And new this morning, Vice President Kamala Harris will be responding to those efforts by the school board, adding a last-minute trip to Jacksonville, kind of target that he believes works stuff, or kind of verbal tics or lawsuits, or you look more results of that over the course of this week when it comes to what the school board has been doing, putting into place one of the laws that DeSantis helped shepherd through. And new this morning, Vice President Kamala Harris will be responding.
I was trying to find the exact quote that he said because he quoted it directly, then she quoted it incorrectly.
To those efforts by the school board, adding a last-minute trip to Jacksonville to her itinerary today. It is in direct response to the state's newly approved standards for teaching Black history. One of the requirements for middle school students is to include, quote, how slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Harris forcefully condemned that new.
Now you see how he worded it right there. Then she worded it that they're going to be taught that the slaves benefited from slavery. So she quoted it wrong. And, you know, what I want to see is, you know, an actual discussion between the powers to be on both sides that actually deal with it legitimately, where neither side is being, you know, straw manned, and they're just having a real discussion about what it's about.
Thursday.
Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
Well, CNN's Priscilla Alvarez joins us now live from the White House. Priscilla, I thought this was fascinating last night because this clearly wasn't a pre-scheduled trip, at least from the time that we usually expect a vice president or presidential trip. This happened fairly quickly. The decision was made to send the vice president down and for the vice president to go down herself. Tell us about the backdrop here of why this happened.
And it's also not the first time that this has happened, Phil. Vice President Harris also went to Tennessee following controversy that happened in the legislature there. So this is part of the ongoing trips over the course of the summer that the vice president has made to highlight areas where the White House and Democrats see Republican attacks against what they call the freedoms like abortion and now also education. Now, again, this is the first Biden administration official to go to Florida since those controversial standards were approved. And it is an opportunity for the vice president to talk about what you heard there in condemning these standards, fiercely criticizing them, and also what she said earlier this week at that same event, calling it, quote, revisionist history. Now, again, to remind viewers, these are standards that would teach students how slaves developed skills that could be applied for personal benefit, and then also touches on massacres and, quote, acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. This, again, has received fierce criticism. And it is an opportunity, again, for Vice President Harris to go and highlight the disagreements that the White House has with this and talk with civil rights leaders, parents, and teachers.
All right. Are you back? Mic check on Hood Conservative.
Oh yeah,
on Hood Conservative.
yeah.
Okay.
Did you catch that line at the end where because we were just talking about, the white man wants to clean up his image as far as the slavery thing is concerned. And did you catch that line at the end where it's like, so we're going to talk about atrocities done to and also by African Americans? Wonder what that's going to be like. How many white girls did you guys attack back then?
Well, when I looked into that, I read some parts of it, and really what they're talking about, like really they're talking post-slavery. Here's another part of it right here. It says another I'm reading this from an article that got the quotes in it. It says another controversial passage reads, instructions include acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans, but is not limited to 1906 Atlanta race riot, 1919 Washington D.C. race riot, 1920 1920 massacre, 1921 Tulsa massacre, and the 1923 Rosewood massacre. So I think that when they talk about that, they will they're going to include that some white people died as well, that some black people killed some white people in the midst of that, and stuff I already knew, but but they're saying that has to be included. Your thoughts on that? Shout out to Dane C. Shout out to Dane C. Says BR and Hood salute. History is about truth. Can't whitewash parts that make you look bad. I agree 100% with that. You can't whitewash parts that make you look bad. But I think what they're reaching for is fighting against a narrative that one makes white people look evil today and is polarized politically to where the left is saying that look at these evil white people, these even white Republicans, even though the people that did this stuff was Democrat. That's a whole nother story. But he said, look at these evil white people. They're not supportive of people of color. People of color vote Democrat. We care about you. Those are the evil people over there. So there's a political fight back against, there's a political fight back going on, and there's, like you're saying, the potential whitewashing that's going on as well. But so in a real way, history, it is being used as a tool. I can say that, and I can see that. But even though I understand what you're saying, and that's one thing I'm going to poke and prod at Hood Conservative about the legitimacy of trying to remove stuff that makes your people look bad, because it does reek of that as well. So we're going to get into that. So don't worry, just be patient. We're going to get into all that.
But thank you for the super chat, Dane C. Do appreciate it. All right, Conservative, you was about to say something. Mike check.
I actually don't even remember what I was about to say.
Oh,
I
my
think you're
bad.
gonna jump into some more clips though.
My bad. No, we had brought up well, no, you had mentioned to me the part about how they was including violence from, against and violence by black people into the whole scheme of how things was going to be, how things were going to be taught. And then in the article that basically when they laid out the quote, it was talking about a lot of the race riots that took place after slavery, in Rosewood, even after the movie Rosewood, you can look and you can see it said I think 6 or 8 black people died and 2 white people died, right in the caption of the movie Rosewood. Even though in the movie all kind of people died, but it was 8 black people died, 6 or 8 black people died, and 2 white people died. They're basically saying that they're going to accurately discuss the death tolls of on both sides. That's what they're saying. Should people be outraged by that? Putting it out there that
I think
there's dead bodies on many sides.
I think what's being said. I'm sorry. I think what's being said is sort of like, yeah, we burned down some of your houses, but I mean, you niggas burned down some of our houses. I thought we were at war. I thought we were fighting. You burned my shit, I burned your shit. Afterwards we shook hands and it's over now. But apparently it's not over now.
All right. Now, here's the thing though, okay? We clearly talking about a situation where, one side was enslaved, there was a slave, the enslaved, and then there was the slavers. And afterwards, there was oppression afterwards. And there was some real actual white supremacy afterwards. And in the attempts of them exercising their white supremacy, of which a lot of black people were hurt, harmed, injured, and killed, some white people got killed too in the fight back. It's like, but it was clearly one side that one side ultimately bullying the other side. So it's almost like, well, we got to include the person that was getting bullied. He did slip a few punches in, but so it does.
I don't know for a fact. I don't know for a fact that's the direction they're going in, because that would be a very stupid direction. I think the direction they probably go in is a lot of the so-called lynchings. Well, not even so-called. A lot of the lynchings that black people would like to refer to as, you guys did something horrible just because he was black. There were probably actual crimes behind that. And so what I think they would do is point out the fact that there were real crimes happening. And then, those crimes and those situations sort of spiraled out of control. But at the heart of those things, those were real crimes. And if you want to play the race games, those were real crimes done by a black against a white. And so that's a different way to kind of attack that argument. And I wonder which way they'll go, because the way you laid out, it'd be kind of a dumb argument to make.
To say that during that post-slavery, during Jim Crow, that it clearly wasn't one side bullying and oppressing another side. Like, you're talking about it like everybody was above board walking around, and then the black person, he did legitimately smack a white woman on the ass, that sexual assault. So as a crime penalty for that sexual assault, he was lynched. It's like that essentially your argument.
Well, it's not even my argument per se. I'm trying to imagine, because we're talking about the curriculum changes that they're making, so that there's a lesson plan. There are particular cases or particular events that they have to include if they're going to make this lesson like real. Yeah. And so what I'm arguing is there has to be something there to make the argument, because I don't assume that all black people were just walking around happy-go-lucky ex-slaves. Like, niggas was doing nigga shit now and eternal. And so maybe some niggas got caught up in some shit, and then the story just like George Floyd. There may be some other facts to these stories that we are not being told in the main public. This is all I'm trying to point out. And so if now they were to go back and point out the other facts to all these stories, it might make the story look completely different once you get all the things together in totality.
Dane C says teachers can still opt out of teaching this BS. Shout out to Dane C. Do appreciate your $2 super chat. Shout out to Kenneth Williams in here with the $10 super sticker. Do appreciate that. Do appreciate you coming on through. Do appreciate you coming on through. Do appreciate everybody coming on through with them. Shout out to all of y'all. Do appreciate y'all dropping something on it. Do appreciate you dropping something on it. Trying to drop a bomb somewhere on there. I got a bomb somewhere. Appreciate it. All right, it's not up for debate. Our history is being altered, erased, and minimized. Yes, we should be outraged with other group. Is this happening to? I'll wait. Removing key points take away the realness. All right. I don't see them removing anything. I do see them adding some things to it. All right. I do see them adding some things to it. Like they're adding something. And let me ask you this one, Hood Conservative. Didn't you already know that some slaves did acquire some skills, and then they use those skills in some type of way? Like how did some slaves buy their freedom? Because that was a real thing, right? Some slaves did buy their freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was talking about this on my show yesterday, and I think I got the characters wrong, but it was even in the novel Roots. That's one of the main story arcs. Was one of the characters. I think he was it Chicken George? He was a cockfighter, and he bought his freedom. And that isn't even the question that I would use to attack the argument. How did blacks build America if we had no skills?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Right. I mean, right. Yeah. And in our own mythology, it's laid out. Did we learn these skills on the boat? I mean, were we master carpenters and blacksmiths on the beach in Africa waiting to be sold?
Right. Okay. So some of those skills would have had to been learned during slavery, and some slaves were able to use those skills to their benefit. In some instances, that's how they did what we already knew, that they some slaves were able to buy their freedom through that skill, and they were able to use that skill to go and buy some of their loved ones. And but what the little known fact is, and I said this before, now, if the slave who had some skills, but bought his freedom, became free, had some property, start buying his loved ones, now they live on his property. Now that property does need to be worked and farmed and everything. And so, those newly freed loved ones got put to work by their loved one who bought them. And if he bought them, that means he now technically owned them, and then got them working on his property. I'm like, oh, no, don't tell me he became master. But, it's so the point. Go ahead, man. I laugh every time I think of that one, but
because it's so much worse than that, right? You're talking almost about just a simple employer-employee kind of relationship of the day, whereas those stories get dark when you start getting into. I forget the name of the guy. I think it might have been like Carter G. Woodson. There was some famous black scholar from yesteryear who actually compiled basically an anthology of black slavery accounts. And there were many stories of wives buying husbands and then selling that nigga because he ain't shit. And then vice versa, husbands buying wives and then, man, let me get my money back from this bitch. This bitch don't even do like I told her to do. And so
It's
he
so
went to go get
funny.
his money back.
It's so funny. When I heard it the first way around, I was like, that was awful. But when you said it, the man buying his wife and then selling her when she, I was like, okay, I can see that one. I can see that one. That, yeah. I support that.
Right. This is what I'm saying.
I
Like,
support selling her back. Just get the fuck out of here.
Like now, if you tell black men, if a black man's first lesson in slavery was the guy who sold his wife because she wouldn't do like he told, you might have a completely different emotional relationship to the concept of slavery. Because why the bitch can't do what she told? That's what I want to know. Like, what's so hard? But we got told the other version, and now we feel some type of way because of slavery.
Oh man. Man. Well, shout out to
And
you.
I see SKC down there in the chat. I'm sorry, look, SKC mentioned he did want to get in on this, so I think I'm gonna email him the link too, because
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
wonder what SKC's thoughts on this are. This is hilarious.
Yeah, go ahead. Beretta 9 though. Thank you for that. Thank you for that super chat. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the super chat. Do appreciate your perspective. Who else did we have in here? Oh, and he came back with another one. He's saying it's been diluted as if of just the atrocities. I'm sorry, I couldn't even see that shit. As if the atrocities are happenstance. They're removing accountability as well as the sensitivity of our ancestors' suffering. Nothing was exaggerated. In fact, it's greater than. Okay, I use the term exaggerated because people who are familiar with this space are familiar where that quote came from. So that was just to trigger a few extra people to click on it. The slavery was exaggerated. I don't think it was exaggerated in the sense that what happened was bad and it was bad. I just think that there are other layers to it that I would like to see it talked about more. And even when I say other layers to it, I want to know more about the black people back then who were free. I do. In a very odd way, I do want to know more about the black slave owners. I do. It's things that I want to know more about. That's where I'm at with it, but I don't think it was exaggerated. I think there was just things that they're just things that we don't. It's things that don't get taught, which is the irony in all of this. When they're talking about they're trying not to teach certain things, where there's already a lot of things that they don't taught that they don't teach, and a lot of those things that they teach would, for some people, it would change the way they view it. It would change the way they look at it. It would make some people look at it as not as bad. But I think if you're a thinking person, you could say, no, it was still slavery, and slavery was bad, but there's other layers and other things that was going on that's worth knowing about as well. Harambe in the building says, so does it mean we had skills? And some slaves did acquire some skills that and garnered some resources from that. Yes.
Not the
Yes,
skills
that
and
did.
resources are. Why did that come up on my show too? By the way, the skills and resources thing. Like, apparently, black people have been had skills and resources. That is not the thing that's going to solve the problem for us.
Yeah. All right. Let's roll another clip.
Civil rights groups are reacting to these new education standards for African American history in Florida classrooms, and state leaders are defending their decisions. One teacher here on the First Coast told me this is about politics, not about true history.
It is academically dishonest what they're doing.
That's what Justin Vogel, a Creekside High School teacher in St. Johns County, thought while reading the state's new standards for teaching African American history.
I hate it when my profession is in the crosshairs like this.
He sees a lot of politics at play. Wednesday, the Florida Board of Education approved new academic standards for African American history lessons. The board is not elected, but appointed by standards for African American history lessons.
Hey, real quick, I read through that. I found it and I was reading through it. It's really hard to find things that are a problem, but it's really just 2 lines. I just want to point that out. It is two lines that's the problem. The line about here I'll read it verbatim because I got it in front. Down. Instructions include how slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. That line being in there, and a long ass document that's so tedious I couldn't get through all of it. But and then there's the other line about the it suggests massacre was sparked by when they talk about violence, massacres, race riots, they're going to tell full picture of who all was killed on both sides. Those are the lines that basically sparked all of this. Everything else in there looked normal, looked like normal stuff you would teach in history or in Black history or in American history or just the history during the time of slavery and Jim Crow, just the basic stuff. Everything else looked like the normal stuff. It was really just two lines. And so I want to point that out to just get full context of what's going on. And those lines could be disputed on their merit or not, but that's legitimately what it is. That's legitimately what it is.
I think it's interesting, and it's almost it's evidence. It's not like a bulletproof, but it's more like circumstantial evidence that proves that from a certain standpoint, from an ideological perspective, perhaps even, you can't teach Black people that they had wins during these time periods. If you teach Black people that they were anything else than the losers who were always getting kicked in the nuts and hung from a tree, you're lying to the Blacks, and you can't do that. Don't lie to them by telling them the times that they actually won. Or even this is worse. This is even worse. Don't tell Black people about the things that they should actually feel guilty about. Because look, if a race
Wait, what do you mean? You
riot,
lost me right there. Go
all
ahead.
right. We should feel guilty that we rioted for Floyd, right? So let's extrapolate backwards 100 years. If Black people got ginned up to riot for 1900 Floyd, for George Floyd of 1902 or whatever, some nigga that did some bad things to some girls and he got strung up for it, and then a race riot ensued behind that. We are grandstanding on the fact that there was a race riot when, in fact, listen, we should just let the criminal hang and be done with it. If we let the criminal swing and just go on about our lives, none of these things happen, right? So this is what I mean about a different version, a different narrative of the story.
The stuff that we talk about, where it's normally like a lot of shit going on afterwards. Whether it was Black people who rioted, especially and by the way, it's a couple things to unpack there. Normally, when we're talking about stuff like, I don't know, Rosewood, Tulsa, those things typically, per what we've been taught about it, typically don't start with an actual true crime that was committed. A lot of times the shit was started with a lie. So I'd imagine if Black people was rioting and getting out of pocket back then, I don't think it was happening because some dude actually did rape some woman or something like that. It's normally
nigga never raped nobody.
I'm pretty sure it did, but okay, the ones that we know about were the situations, the Emmett Till situations, or I think Rosewood was based off a lie. It's shit be based off a lie, and it's normally white people being the aggressor, then Black people retaliating, and a few white people die in a retaliation standoff. That's what they're talking about. So I don't. It doesn't compare. What happened then don't compare to George Floyd, because I don't. At least I don't know the moment in history where somebody got got killed by white people, and then Black people rioted and burned white people shit like Black people do today when somebody get killed by a white cop. We go burn up our own shit. I'm
not saying I know this story for a fact, so I may be proven wrong on this, and I'll hold the L if I am. But I'm laying out this gauntlet. If you were to go look for a story where there was a race riot and then underneath that race riot, there was an actual horrible crime, this kind of lays out the argument. This is all I'm saying.
It's true, but okay, I didn't know. I'm probably foggy on history, but far as how I understand it, it wasn't race riots back then where black people was the aggressors of the riot. Well, probably don't even accurately call it a race riot. I mean, it was. I mean, you don't call it do you call Tulsa a race riot, or do you call it they call it a massacre?
I don't even call it a riot.
Okay, no,
I'm
it
not
wasn't a
even
riot.
sure.
It was a
I
riot is
look
not the
at
right
Tulsa.
word.
I look at Tulsa, and right, maybe riot is the wrong word, because I look at Tulsa more as like a fight. I look at Tulsa because look, both sides were armed and neither one was afraid to shoot. It's just the white boys had planes and shit. Like they had a different type of setup. But I look at it more like a fight than just a riot. Like you just got rolled on. But we're talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma specifically, though. But that's what, like, if you get into the individual specifics of these stories, I'm pretty sure you'd be shocked at some of the details you could pull out that aren't part of the mainstream narrative.
I'm sure there are some situations where a nigga did some nigga shit, and back then it was more of a mob rule type of time, and the townspeople could be judge, jury, and executioner. So yeah, I have no doubt that happened. That somebody did some. There were instances where somebody did some shit, and then somebody got hung for breaking the law. Dirty Folks told a story how it probably was a made up story. Dirty Folks is a comedian, but let's take the story at face value. He said his granddaddy got hung, and he said his granddaddy basically had it coming, or he deserved it. I was like, damn, what the hell happened? He said a white man had spit on his granddaddy. This white man was a gun owner, owned a gun shop. So his granddaddy went in there and bought a gun and ammo and loaded it up in front of him and then shot the man that spit on him. And then right there, in broad daylight, like New Jack City, just shot him in broad daylight, and then his granddaddy got hung. And it's like when I hear stories like that, I mean, one, kudos to your granddaddy.
Right.
I ain't
Like,
tripping.
why can't we tell the story in that way? Like, it was a lot of tough guys out there. And, tough guys meet a horrible end a lot of times. But, when you watch movies and men die heroically, you don't feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I mean, I look at his death the same way I look at Mel Gibson and Braveheart yelling freedom at the end. Like, hey, he went out. He went out like how he went out, and I was okay with it. But so I understand what you're saying, that there's layers with some of these stories. There's layers with some of these stories that that don't get scratched beneath the surface. But I understand why. I understand why it's hitting awkwardly for some people, because, and I think you hit it right on the head, they don't like to hear about the small victories, the small battles that was won in a larger war that was lost. They don't want to even hear about our small battles that was won. They don't. Dane C pointed out people love hearing about the Haitian rebellion. Yes, and that is true. And a lot of people happily went to go see Nat Turner, the Nat Turner movie with the but it does seem like you can't talk about it's a tough one for black people, because they feel like if you talk about anything that was happening that wasn't outright awful, you're trying to take away from how awful it was. And then there's like a needing, almost a desperate clinging to, like, we have this, it has to feel awful all the time. We need them to feel bad all the time. It's like we can't talk about it from the standpoint of that yeah, god damn it, they came in there and they was trying to do some shit, and yeah, we fired back and we killed a lot of them crackers too, but eventually, yeah, our shit got burned down, but we put we put as many of them down as we could. They
gave them hell, boys.
I don't mind that story. I literally don't mind that being in there.
But let me get to the super chats before I play this clip. Let me get to some more super chats before I play this clip. Shout out to everybody supporting the stream. Appreciate each and every one of you. Dane C said 99% of freed slaves were runaways. That 99% stat sound made up. It just do. It just. But
How do you
I mean,
free a runaway? Like that don't even work. I don't even understand how that. What are the logistics? Like, what do you mean 99% of the freed slaves were runaways? I don't get how that works.
But thank you, Dane C. Do appreciate that. He says, Beretta says, let me make that bigger so I can see it. He said, they say we can't get reparations because we weren't alive, but they won't even pay reparations to the living survivors of Tulsa. I've always made the argument that that a lot of stuff that happened during the Jim Crow era, that people should be able to get legitimate reparations for that one. That should be the easiest one to secure. But he said, but yeah, I say racism doesn't exist today and we aren't victims. Tulsa was United States terrorism. Thank you for the $20 super chat. Do appreciate that. Where we at? All right, let's get back into this tape.
Lessons. The board is not elected, but appointed by the governor. Teachers and civil rights groups are calling out certain requirements. One in particular requires teaching middle school students that, quote, slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit.
And that they could be then used for their personal benefit, supposedly, I guess, once emancipated. I don't know. I think it's it's an unfinished statement at the very least. But most likely it's offensive.
That portion of the curriculum has received so much criticism that two members of the state's African American History Standards Work Group responded by issuing a statement saying, any attempt to reduce slaves to just victims of oppression fails to recognize their strength, courage, and resiliency during a difficult time in American history. Another part of the new curriculum drawing criticism states that lessons about Reconstruction will include, quote, acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans during various riots, including the Ocoee Massacre. The Ocoee Massacre was an incident in which Blacks were attacked for trying to about recognize their strength, courage, and resiliency during a difficult time in American history. Another part of the new curriculum drawing criticism states that lessons about Reconstruction will include, quote, acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans during various riots, including the Ocoee Massacre. The Ocoee Massacre was an incident in which Blacks were attacked for trying to vote. Dozens of Blacks were killed. 2 white men died.
So the perpetrators of the Ocoee Massacre were the problem. This is like akin to blaming African Americans who sat at the lunch counters, who sat peacefully and were arrested.
A statement from two.
Now, am I wrong for saying if they only killed 2, they ain't kill enough of them? If dozens of y'all die, I mean, that's how I look at it. I don't see nothing wrong with putting in there that 2 of them was killed. What's wrong? I don't see nothing wrong with putting in the fight back. Like they were accosted trying to vote by armed gunmen, and they fired back, and they got 2 of them, but a lot of them was killed. I don't see the problem in putting that Black people wasn't just completely weak and curled up in a fetal position whenever a white person said something to them back then. No, they killed some white people. What's the issue?
Right. If this is all that there is to it, like, you know, I was making arguments from left field. Like, this is a really simple argument. I don't even see the whole point in being upset about this.
Yeah, you thought they was hung, and you trying to make an argument that maybe they hung some niggas that deserve to get hung.
Right, like, I mean, I thought y'all was going to do something real controversial. Shit, this is nothing, man.
Oh man.
two members who helped create the new curriculum, says it is disappointment, but nevertheless unsurprising that critics would reduce months of work to create Florida's first ever standalone strand of African American history standards to a few isolated expressions without context. But Vogel says,
I just don't believe that there's real fidelity happening here. It's just political theater.
the Teachers Union of Florida has also come out against this new curriculum. Jessica Clark, First Coast News, on your side.
All right. Okay, we got Roland Martin coming up now. Hold on, wait. Let me just curiosity. Okay, I was just curious if Roland, because a Roland Martin video came on next after that. I was curious. Okay, is Roland Martin talking about this? 'Cause I know he live it. I know he live it about those changes in the history curriculum. But all right. Let me let's see what else we got in here. Let's see what else we got in here. You said you sent the link to SKC?
Yeah, he said he'll try to come up later. I guess he's tied up right now.
Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got in here.
Erupting in Florida over how students will learn about Black history. The State Board of Education has just approved standards for public schools. One rule that teachers must now follow requires middle school students to learn, quote, how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. And at the high school level, if students learn about race massacres like the 1920 rampage in Ocoee, Florida, teachers must include, quote, acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. Joining me to discuss is Andrew Spar, president of the Florida Education Association. Andrew, to be clear, when it comes to that massacre, that was against African Americans, trying to prevent them from voting. Just to be clear with folks who may not be familiar with that history, what is your reaction to these standards?
We're very concerned about the standards here in Florida. You know, what teachers want to do is they want to teach kids an accurate, complete, and honest history, both the good and the bad. And what we see happening here right now in Florida is the governor is putting his political agenda ahead of the education of our children, and he's picking and choosing what he believes should be part of the history that is taught in our schools. I mean, you mentioned two examples from middle and high school, but even in elementary school, where we typically talk to kids about explaining and describing and defining, they're being told just to recognize and identify key figures in African American history, not talk about their contributions and how those contributions may have affected their lives and the lives of their families.
What other standards, are there other ones besides the ones you mentioned, besides the ones that I outlined there in the introduction to you, that are concerning?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're talking about what's missing from these standards. Florida's Articles of Succession, when there was the Civil War, aren't even included in these standards, and talking about the impact that that has on our students. Or on that had on Black people, and particularly slaves. We also see, when we talk about the Supreme Court ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, again, another key element is missing, which is when the Florida legislature voted to say that the Supreme Court ruling was null and void in the state of Florida. Those are key elements that we need to know, because we learn from our history. And when you leave that out of the teaching to our students, it's problematic. And keep in mind, teachers in Florida are operating under a law passed last year, which was the Stop Woke Act, where they are threatened with their jobs and their teaching certificate if they teach something that the governor decides is part of woke in America or woke.
Hey, Bernard, real quick, let me ask you a question.
Okay. Yeah.
He mentioned Brown versus Board of Education a second ago, and it was something about that moment in time that's actually curious to me, and I want to sort of lay out this little nugget of the whole scenario. If you look at some of these pictures of that whole incident, because there was that famous moment where, you know, a couple of Black kids are trying to get into the school, and the National Guard was there, and you know, they were spitting on them. All that stuff happened. I think what was Was it Jerry Jones one of those kids that had one of those things? But anyway,
yeah.
America was integrated at gunpoint. If you look at some of those pictures, those people, those white people, literally had like bayonets at their back. Like, if you think about it, we got integrated. We were forced together. What do you think about that little concept in and of itself, like being integrated at gunpoint?
Okay. I mean, interesting. You know, the way you framed that, yeah, it does make you stop and think. I do think a good portion of the country was, was in favor of it. You know, that's why the government started rolling it out. But then there was definitely a percentage that wasn't. And so the government had to come to protect, people from those that wasn't. So I don't, the way that you framed it would be, more accurate and hit as hard as, you probably was trying to hit with it, if it was to the point to where everybody in the country was like, man, fuck this integration shit. And the government just like forced it on it, like almost like on some martial law type shit. No, you will integrate. It wasn't exactly.
Well, isn't that what happened? I mean, without the power of the federal government, there would be no forced integration. There would be no EEOC and all that stuff, right? So I'm kind of laying out that little argument in and of itself without all the other, facts on the ground. Just the idea of being forced together at gunpoint. Because that's really what I think what was the civil rights movement if not the government deciding, all right, we're gonna force you niggas together. All right, the niggas want in, we're gonna force you to accept these niggas now.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, the only question in there is what percentage of white people were for it and what percentage of white people were against it. But yes, the government did have to step in and force it. That's a brute fact that can't really be argued around. So yeah, it says a lot. Says a lot. All right.
Stuff he does not want taught in our schools. And so because of that, teachers are very hesitant as to how they navigate standards when things like key issues are missing.
So, Andrew, your organization represents 150,000 teachers and also other education professionals. What are you hearing from them now with these standards passed?
Well, we've been hearing for a while from them because last year, again, Florida passed the Stop Woke Act. They also had a civics training that they did for teachers. And we were hearing from them about how it seemed like they were trying to rewrite the history, leave things out, talking about how the founding fathers in our country fought against slavery, but not talking about how they owned slaves. So teachers are very concerned with what's happening and how we're narrowing the curriculum. And they're also very concerned that many of our students are no longer seeing themselves in their learning. And that is really, really important for kids to learn. It's one of those foundational skills one of those foundational needs that kids have, which is to see themselves in their learning and how their learning connects to them. So when you say don't teach current events, when you say limit what kids can see and learn, that's a real problem for educators.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What are the long-term effects that you are concerned about with children learning history the way it is outlined in these standards?
Again, there's that old adage, if we don't learn from history, we're destined to repeat it. So if you are selecting what you can and can't learn in our schools, as the governor is doing right now for his own political ambitions, then kids are missing out on that education they deserve and need. If they don't learn about...
All right, one thing that I'm noticing, he's talking more about what's left out of it and not talking about what's in it. And I mean, he's not exactly hitting hard over the head with things that are left out. So, I mean, it does reek of, like what I said, like what I came up with. I mean, I found an article. I felt like the article that I found where it said it's just two passages that
that that had the things that got everybody up in arms. It had the statements that had everybody up in arms. Once you talk about that, it's not as much to talk about, and then now they got to talk about nitpick things that were left out. But it did, the stuff that he named seemed like the normal things that would naturally be like. There is so much happening in history. It's so many things. Like it's certain stuff is going to get that's not going to make the cut in the curriculum. You know, it just is what it is. It wasn't nothing that was just damning. Like, whoa, they got rid of that. So I don't see that to be that big of a thing. But one question that I do want to throw your way, and this is what I was looking for, and this is interesting, and I want your thoughts on this. I found MSNBC covering it. I found the Fox News covering it. I found MSNBC covering it. I found CNN covering it. I could not find anything where the where Fox News was. It's like Fox News is silent on this, and
you
I
want
found
that? Hold on, I'm gonna give that to you. I think it's one of the last emails I sent you because this story is relatively like a breaking story. So there's stuff kind of coming out continuously. I'm still waiting on the View to cover this, but I had a clip from Fox News somewhere queued up. Give me a second, I'll shoot it right to you. Actually, I think it's probably in one of the emails because I know I had it this morning. But let me make sure I give it to you in the back check. Give me a sec.
All right, hold up. Let me see what I got. I think that was the third. Okay, you did send another video. You sent something. Okay, you sent me those messages. We'll read those tweets by Delano Squires, and then you sent me something else on Twitter. I'll pull that up. This is DeSantis himself talking, so we'll pull that up. All right.
Oh, I just found a clip with Charlemagne the God talking about this on the Breakfast Club.
Yeah, we'll get into that. All right, let's hear from the horse's mouth.
Well, you should talk to them about it. I mean, I didn't do it, and I wasn't involved in it. But I think what they're doing is I think that they're probably going to show some of the folks that eventually parlayed, being a blacksmith into doing things later in life. But the reality is, all of that is rooted in whatever is factual. They listed everything out. And if you have any questions about it, just ask the Department of Education. You can talk about those folks. But I mean, these were scholars who put that together. It was not anything that was done politically.
What'd you think about his answer right there? It was slightly evasive, but I know. Just what's your thoughts on that? I'll hold my thoughts on that. What you got to say on that?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I couldn't really hear it that much because I was having like signal issues, so I can't even comment on it, honestly.
I mean, it was short, so I'll run it back. I'll run it back. They asked him about the passages.
Well, you should talk to them about it. I mean, I didn't do it, and I wasn't involved in it. But I think what they're doing is I think that they're probably going to show some of the folks that eventually parlayed, being a blacksmith into doing things later in life. But the reality is, all of that is rooted in whatever is factual. They listed everything out. And if you have any questions about it, just ask the Department of Education. You can talk about those folks. But I mean, these were scholars who put that together. It was not anything that was done politically.
All right. I mean, I don't know if you caught it that time. You did catch it that time, right?
Basically, if you can make if you can actually pull from historical like source records and firsthand accounts or whatever to make an argument, then I don't think you're wrong for making an argument that's actually, well sourced and based in, documented facts or whatever. And if Florida can do that, if Florida can say, look, this is what was going on according to this evidence, this is what happened, and this is what we want to talk about, then I don't see the issue here.
Yeah. Oh. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm fixing something in the back. I see. Oh, okay, cool. All right. Sorry, I had to. I see there was something going on in the back. All right. Here's the deal. Here's the deal with that. He's saying it's nothing political. So in that sense, he's separating himself from it by saying that, hey, it's educators, it's the Department of Board of Education. These are, the history educated people who came to their conclusions about what's in there. I don't exactly control what's in there, but those are the people that do this stuff, and that's what they came up with. And he did explain how that the whole thing about a slave, if he learned to be a blacksmith while in slavery, then it went forward and did something with it. He kind of explained that and laid that out, but at the same time, he to some degree tried to pass the buck over. And I don't think that's accurate to say that it's nothing political to it, because everything that he's doing as far as education, even with the critical race theory, it is a political counterpunch to the wokeness. It is a political counterpunch to the wokeness. So I don't think it would be a bad look on him to say, yes, this is political. I'm politicizing the kids' education about history. But the fact of the matter is, the other side is doing that as well. So it's almost like he's in a situation where politically he has to throw the stone and hide his hands. It's kind of what's going on.
Yes, but the hiding your hand is just what's going on anyway. So it's not like the left is saying that we want to teach your kids about all this gender stuff so that later on down the line they'll be a lot more malleable when we introduce some more of this gender stuff to them as adults or whatever. We're not bringing all these people in here illegally and then getting them put into the system on government benefits so that later on, once we have all these people enrolled in these systems and government benefits, we have a easily tappable supply of not only voters but manpower for activism and other such events. Like, we're totally not bringing these people in here to fluff our numbers up, right? So they're playing the game and not saying what they're actually doing too. So I'm not faulting Ron DeSantis for playing the game on their level. So when the news comes out and talks about it like this, it's like, so what? I don't care. Cry more.
All right, so yeah, you got me included. This is the last thing we'll play, and I'll put the link in the chat. Somebody want to come up and become a part of this conversation. Where we're at here. So let's get into this. I was up last night digging, trying to just see what was the vibe on Fox News as far as this. All the CNN and MSNBC coverage was 100% against it. They brought in people that were against it. That was clearly 100% the direction that they were going with it. I was very curious to hear what Fox News had to say. Holy crap, y'all can't see
You
that.
don't have to fact check every racial hoax from MSNBC, and I usually don't. If I did, I'd do it for the whole hour.
Could y'all at least hear
now
that?
that the vice president is involved?
Shit, I listened to damn near 30 seconds of a video and y'all couldn't even hear it.
Fuck.
Shit, I thought that was me for a second. I'm like, damn, my signal was really bad.
All right, here we go.
Florida's racist again. Here's the new hoax. They say Florida schools are teaching students that slavery was good for blacks.
Free housing, permanent employment, and
Okay, this shit was funny, but let's see something in. Let's do a build it while we fly it thing. RM, click on that and see if you could add it to the stream. The video in the back. Are you there? Are you there? Are you there? I want to see if you could add that to the stream, the video. Because that way, if I'm fucking up, you could add it to the stream and help me out if you see it playing down there. Okay, I don't know. Okay, anyway, I don't think she could do it.
You know what's funny about that? You know what's so interesting about that whole thing? What he just said, that you got free housing.
Wait, hold on. Let's let it play all the way out again because it was funny at the end. Hold on.
Florida's racist again. Here's the new hoax. They say Florida schools are teaching students that slavery was good for blacks.
free housing, permanent employment, and all-you-can-eat cornbread. Board of Education of Florida wants you to see that job description and think, maybe slavery wasn't so bad.
Nigga. Go ahead. I had to play that all the way through. People need to hear the cornbread. All right. Hood, are you there? Mic check.
Yeah, free housing, guaranteed employment, and all the cornbread you can eat is the Democrat 2020, what's the next election? 2026? That's their 2026 platform. Or is it 2024? Damn, is it 2024? But yeah, that's their next election platform. Mm-hmm. That is it, and that's basically what Black people have been expecting from the Democrats since Lyndon B. Johnson, right? Listen, we need housing, we need some jobs programs, and we need cornbread, various flavors and types of cornbread. Just saying.
All right, let's roll it.
Maybe slavery wasn't so bad.
If you're going to say there were benefits to slavery, then you're going to say there were benefits to women being property and subject to abuse and subject to home enslavement.
It is not only insulting, it is humiliating.
Oh, I know, Jesse, you don't have to fact check every racial hoax from MSNBC, and I usually don't. If I did, I'd do it for the whole hour. But now that the vice president is involved, Kamala Harris, I got to do it. So here's how it got started. Florida's Board of Ed came out with their new Black History curriculum. Primetime looked at the curriculum. It's rigorous. It's in depth. It should be like that. It covers the darkest parts of American history, how slaves were shackled and trafficked from Africa, broken by their masters, and forced into atrocious conditions. But that's not all it covers. It's a brutally honest depiction of American slavery, the institution, and therefore covers slavery from the perspective of the slave instead of just from the perspective of the master. The curriculum includes how Black slaves were able to use their experience, in some cases, to make their brutally hard lives better. The course examines the various duties and trades performed by slaves like agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation. Instruction includes how slaves developed.
Yo, if this shit don't sound like Job Corps. Hold on, stop. This shit, I'm almost ready to go. Let me go get some skills and resources real quick. I'll be back in like 3 years.
Personal benefit. That's the section everyone's freaking out about, especially Kamala Harris. Painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation. Instruction includes how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit.
Now, I think, okay, this is a big part of the reason why that's bothersome to a lot of people, because they're viewing it as, well, after
X number of years of slavery, the slaves were free and now they had those skills. Like, I don't think, I mean, if that's what's meant, then yeah, to me, that's kind of stupid to point that out there. Like, hey, but the slavery was awful. But listen, when emancipation happened, then hey, they knew how to, do some shit. I don't think I don't think that makes any sense to make that argument. To even you talk about it. Where I think
It
at
may
least
not. It may not make sense. All right, go ahead.
no, wait, no. Where I thought that they were trying to go with it, or at least where I think that they were trying to go with it, where it is, worth pointing out, is like we said earlier in the show, some slaves bought their own freedom. Some slaves, used whatever skills they had, whatever they learned, they used that, they bartered and traded with that, they ended up buying their own freedom. And some of them even, bought the freedom of their loved ones with whatever skills that they had to barter and trade with out on the market. That, like, I don't think there's nothing wrong with pointing that out. Like, that was the goal of many slaves I would assume all, but I just say most slaves to not be slaves and then use whatever you had to try to work your way, fight your way out of that. Aside from running, that was the way to get out of it, and that was what they did. And then that skill went forward. That became that's what they did after they got their freedom, and after they helped to acquire their family's freedom and all of that. Like, so it's nothing wrong with including that into the story. Like, when I say nothing wrong with including it into the story, I'm more or less saying what I said earlier in the show, that we already knew that was a thing. But if somebody's making an argument, and this is what you was going to respond to, if somebody's making an argument, that after X number of hundreds of years of slavery, hey, these niggas knew how to blacksmith, so yay, that ain't necessarily a good argument. But go ahead.
History doesn't necessarily give you arguments that are emotionally appealing, but they are relevant and true nonetheless. So when it comes to that time period, let's say slavery ended in 1870, like 74. I forget. I'm bad at Black history. Forgive me. So slavery ended, and by the time the 1900s come around, you have a bunch of black towns pop up. So in 25 years later, you got black populations, unto themselves, that are, self-sustained or whatever. You can't do that without people who have the knowledge and know-how and the skills to actually maintain a little community. And then also on the grander scale too, black people were how would you call this? Like a blue collar workforce thing. Like and this is one of the things about that makes racism. This is one of the realities of like racial competition, right? It's probably cheaper to get you a black blacksmith or a black whatever than it was to get you an Irishman or something like that. And so you got this group that is economically viable because of those skills that got slaved into them. You don't like the sound of it, tough, but that's what made them strong. Fuck you.
That's what made them strong. Fuck you. Oh shit. But no, see, here's the deal though. When it comes to that, yes, they finished slavery. I mean, after slavery was over, they legitimately had some skills that ultimately helped them, build the towns that they build. The things that black people do brag on, that those skills, they acquired a lot of those skills while in slavery. Okay, cool. Here's the reason I say that the argument it comes off as pointless when you look at it from the standpoint that yes, those that were free in 1865, those who were freed in 1865, okay, they walked away with some skills that they benefited with, but okay, still, roughly 5 generations lived and died on a plantation. that's why it's like what the fuck? It's like, so why even bother with that? But when you look at it from the perspective of, you know, why as a slave you did acquire some skills, and then you use that to buy your freedom, and then you know that was what you ultimately tried to, you know. And from that standpoint, it's nothing wrong with including that, because we already knew that, like you pointed out earlier. That's what the fuck Chicken George did in Roots. So it's like we already knew that, you know.
Well, not only that, I think you don't understand the power that was imbued in us after this horrible thing of American slavery, right? The Back to Africa movement got started up around the 1900s. You know, just before the 1900s. You got a couple of figures, and I'm learning some of this information very recently. It's crazy when you start to research the true nascent origins of these black movements. But all this black Back to Africa stuff started up around the 1900s with, like, you know, Garvey and stuff. But what happened when we went back to Africa? We essentially came back as the white man. You understand that?
No, break it down.
Liberia. And when we went back to Africa, we pretty much dominated, enslaved, quote unquote, air quotes, enslaved our black cousins in them. Because, you know, we American now. We know what we're doing, and we know what needs to be done. And so we went to Africa and did it.
Wow.
I mean, to this day, they still speak American. They still speak English.
Huh. Yeah. Shout out to Hoop Jargon Media Network. Mute up real quick, Hoop. I mean, not Hoop, but Hood. The Hoop Jargon Media Network says, for the due diligence on the topic. I think he's talking about OG, the due diligence on the topic. All right, we about to roll the rest of this one.
Last $2. I'm not gonna lose.
Going to get the link in the chat real soon.
That's the section everyone's freaking out about, especially Kamala Harris.
Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
No one is arguing slaves benefited from slavery. No one is saying that. It's not true. They're teaching how black people developed skills during slavery in some instances that could be applied for their own personal benefit. I mean, Kamala, don't you know what Florida's teaching its students? The two people who wrote Florida's African-American history curriculum, two African-American PhDs, are standing by it. Here's what they say. Any attempt to reduce slaves to just victims of oppression are standing by it. Here's what they say.
Hold on. We just found
skills
out.
during slavery in some instances that could be applied for their own personal benefit. I mean, Kamala, don't you know what Florida's teaching its students? The two people who wrote Florida's African-American history curriculum, two African-American PhDs, are standing by it. Here's what they say.
They saying two black people wrote that. Like that. That's new info. That's new info.
Okay. Any attempt to reduce slaves to just victims of oppression fails to recognize their strength, courage, and resilience during a difficult time in American history. Florida students deserve to learn how slaves took advantage of whatever circumstances they were in to benefit themselves and the community of African descendants.
That, the way that was worded, sums up a lot of what I was trying to say earlier. And that part I do agree with. That part I do agree with.
But Kamala Harris, again today, even after this has been explained, attacked Florida.
We are imperfect. And we must be honest about that to understand then our history, where we've been, and then have a North Star in terms of where we must go.
We agree. We have to be honest. American history is complicated, and it's worth having a conversation about, especially about how to teach it, as long as we can all agree to the full story. But we can't have an honest conversation with the likes of Kamala Harris or the likes of MSNBC. They don't want an honest conversation. Why is Kamala Harris so dishonest about how Black history is taught? Is she ignorant and hasn't read the curriculum? Is she just being handed talking points by staff? Or does she not want African American history taught this way? Does she not want students to learn how resilient and capable Black Americans were during slavery and afterwards? What is Kamala Harris hiding?
What they are doing is they are creating these unnecessary debates. This is unnecessary.
As long as we can all agree to the full story. But we can't have an honest conversation with the likes of Kamala Harris or the likes of MSNBC. They don't want an honest conversation. Why is Kamala Harris so dishonest about how Black history is taught? Is she ignorant and hasn't read the curriculum? Is she just being handed talking points by staff? Or does she not want African American history taught this way? Does she not want students to learn how resilient and capable Black Americans were during slavery and afterwards? What is Kamala Harris hiding?
What they are doing is they are creating these unnecessary debates. This is unnecessary to debate whether enslaved people benefited from slavery. Are you kidding me? Are we supposed to debate that?
All right. All right. While we wait for people to come up, and if you're going to come up, you need to come up now, because I don't anticipate this being a long, stretched out show. I don't anticipate that. In fact, this may be a 2-hour show. So if you're interested in coming up, you want to do that nowish. And by nowish, I mean right now. But we're about to pull up something by Delano Squires, and this sort of kind of makes the point that Hood Conservative was making. Where's the hell did I just put that? Hold on. There we go. All right, it sort of makes the point that Hood Conservative was making. Delano Squires says, at a certain point, you have to pick a narrative. Your previous tweets and historical accounts of things you claim slaves built the White House disprove the notion the slaves, he says, disprove the notion that the enslaved didn't learn or develop any trades while in bondage. So he's basically saying that, yes, it's true. It's a true and brute fact that, yes, they did learn some they did learn some trades and everything while they were in slavery. So yeah, you can't have the narrative that we built this country and then, you know, turn around and say that those who didn't learn skills. Okay. He says, oh, really? The USA wasn't founded on slavery. So what class of people built the White House? What class of people built the U.S. Capitol building? What class of people built the building in that building, in that house? What group of people built the building in that houses the Supreme Court? Thank you for that. Hold on, where we at? Okay, that's what I was looking for. Oh, wait, no, that's not it. Or is that it? I apologize. I'm confused. I got too much shit in front of me. He says, there is not now, nor has there ever been any evidence that white slave owners taught slaves skills. This is somebody else is saying. More often than not, slave owners were lazy and didn't have these skills themselves. Like, did folks really think some random white woman invented mac and cheese? Okay, yeah, that's just a rather random person on Twitter. All right, this one right here says stonemason Colin Williams trained enslaved people on the spot at the government's quarry at Akia, Virginia. Enslaved people quarried and cut the rough stone that was later dressed and laid by Scottish masons to erect the walls of the president's house. The slaves joined a workforce that included local white laborers and artisans from Maryland and Virginia, as well as immigrants from Ireland, Scotland, and other European nations. All right, that was
That's
more or
a
less
weird.
what
This
we
is
played.
a weird. This is a weird segue, but you notice they were masons, stone masons, and then they were working with Scottish masons, and I immediately thought of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and then I immediately after that asked, how did Black people get into Masonry in the first place? How did we become Prince Hall Freemasons? I mean, I have no idea. I'm literally asking that because that little blurb in history just made that connection for me in my mind. I'm like, how'd that happen?
Right. Well, all right, we got to go real quick. We only got like 10 minutes left in the show, but we are joined by the contractor. Go ahead. You have the floor. You have the mic.
Salute to you, sir. Salute to the panel in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, it's true that slaves did learn skills during that dark time in our history. But please keep in mind, the Moors went into Europe and we taught them. So all they did was teach us the same skills that we taught them that had been broken and taken from us. So it's not, they didn't do anything magical or mysterious by teaching these uneducated, to them, beasts of burden. These people, because that's how they treated them, was beasts of burden. Every skill that they learned help enrich the pockets of the master. So let's just keep that 100. If you have 100 Negroes on your plantation and 20 are carpenters and 30 are farmers and the rest are doing metal work, then yeah, you can create products and services and then sell that. So they didn't teach us anything. They just they just showed us the same stuff we already showed them. But I'll land the plane there, sir.
All right. When you say the same thing that we showed them, I don't know. I guess the only thing I'll have to say about that if there were Black people who did know how to do some things, and they showed some white people on a different part of the planet how to do some things, and then fast forward through history, some white people traveled to what became the Americas and then went back in the direction of Africa and scooped up some and bought some slaves from Africa. Those slaves that they bought, chances are, probably didn't know how to do whatever you said the Moors taught another group of white people sometime. So that's where we run into the problem that we taught them that and they just retaught us what we taught them. It's it's like skipping a lot of flights of stairs, but I do understand the connection that you made, but it don't work the way that you I don't think it worked the way that you described it.
Well, if you take a person and you strip them down and you take all of their resources from them, you strip all the knowledge they have from them, and you do that over generations. You had those people, those African people that were taken. They were obviously they had to have some kind of skills and knowledge because they were surviving, they were living, they were alive over there on the African continent. The Moors went into Europe years before that and actually civilized Europe. Europeans were still relieving themselves in the streets. All the architecture, all the sciences, we taught them. The Moors taught the Europeans those skills. After the Moors were kicked out of Europe, those same Europeans went back into Africa later on and took those people and brought them over to the Americas. So it's kind of like the snake eating its own tail. It just rewinds. It goes right back.
I think that is a severe. I'm sorry. I just think that
Were
is
the
a severe
slaves that were
exaggeration of certain facts.
Were the slaves that were
For
sold on
starters,
the coast of West Africa, were those also the Moors that taught the white people whatever you're saying they taught them? That's the you can't really get around from that flaw. Well, go ahead, conservative.
well, that's kind of one of the places I was going to go. Where when you were taking this argument of we're all black together, and it doesn't work in a situation like this because when it comes to like the Moors specifically, a lot of I don't even buy that the Moors were this quote unquote black group because the Moors were an Islamic group primarily. Now, the story of Islam in Africa is way more brutal than the story of Christianity in Africa. And no one ever points out the fact that in order for there to be such a thing as a Moor, you first had to get thoroughly and brutally dominated by the Arabs. So that the Moors were mostly Arabs and the blacks that they conquered. So I don't know if I buy the whole Moor story. I just refuse to go along with that.
Where's Arabia? What part of the world is Arabia in? What part of the world is
Dude, India was half Muslim, so it's not an issue of distance. They were traveling and conquering from the moment Islam became a thing. They spread like an ink blot out of Saudi Arabia, so it's not an issue of distance. As long as there was no boats to sail across, you could pretty much get conquered by Arabian horsemen spreading Islam. Like that's what happened in North Africa. They came in with thousands of horses and took over.
Yes, sir, you're correct. The point is, those same that the Middle East is in Africa, those same Arabs, it doesn't matter, the Moors, whatever. Long story short, they went into Europe. That's a historical fact. They went into Europe and they possessed knowledge of science, medicine, and culture, architecture, mathematics, and they spread that into Europe, sir.
Hear me out. This is where we're disagreeing. That's not a black claim. That don't belong to us. You can't tell me that the Arabs come and conquer you and then drag you along to their next conquest, and then you want to claim ownership of their next conquest.
Where's Arabia, sir?
It don't matter. Bro,
Where's Arabia,
they came out of Arabia into basically Israel, then to Egypt, and then across all of North Africa. And then, frankly, there's very little evidence that North Africa was ever primarily a black territory. There were always some Mediterranean type people. And so I'm answering your question. It's not even in Africa. That's essentially it's Asia essentially, but it's not in Africa. But the Arabs came into Africa, dominated the North Africans, and then the Moors, they went into Europe. But that was an Arab thing. That doesn't belong to like the West Africans who got sold into slavery.
Okay, it's the story of a stronger force dominating a weaker force that literally went into Europe and civilized them. Our whole point before we muddy the water too much, they taught the Europeans mathematics, science, metallurgy, metalwork, all these different things. Then those same Europeans went into Africa later on, years later, and then enslaved those Africans, took them over to the Americas, and then after they took them over to the Americas, they just retaught them. They retaught them the same stuff they would have learned anyway, but they had no psychological connection to that information anymore. That had been bred out of them. We were turning a beast of burden.
Why would you have why would you have to reteach something to someone that they already know? You don't reteach something to somebody if they already know it.
Because those that knew it were dead and gone by then.
Oh, okay. Can I chime in real quick? I can't hear you, Bernard.
I'm bad. I was muted for a second. Yeah, go ahead, Nate, and speak on whatever you came up to speak on.
Yeah, real quick.
We can move past that part.
Our good friend Camilla, Miss 25% Black, she was up there, railing against DeSantis and this new curriculum. Isn't it weird? She's got all this vigor in her speech and in her spirit to go challenge DeSantis on this one bit of curriculum in the state of Florida, but no vigor to challenge the pornographic books in libraries aimed at children, these pro-gay, pro-trans, homosexual, pedo books that are aimed at kids all over the country, that the women on The View and Democrats throughout the country are fighting to bring in contact with our children, something that could be historically substantiated, that some of the skills blacks learned in slavery assisted them in becoming valuable in the marketplace later on after slavery. I mean, you could make a legitimate argument for that if you're talking to somebody who's not all wound up emotionally and a fucking Luciferian leftist, okay? But so Miss Camilla, Miss 25% black, has no problem with all this pedo shit being given to children, but she's going to go rail against the state of Florida for this one bit of curriculum that's been put in. That shows you how wicked Democrats are, number one. Number two, same Kamala Harris that hasn't gone to the border and stopped the 7 million fucking illegals that have come into this country in the last 2.5 years. Unprecedented under your devil Democrat Party. 7 million illegals flooding our country. She won't go down and take care of that. That's her responsibility as the vice president, to make sure our border is secure. That devil won't do that, right? Democrats. Number three, that cracker on CNN that was talking about how the Florida state legislature voted against, they put out some type of referendum against the 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education. You know that was Leroy Collins, the governor of Florida, a Democrat. Little Big Nate's been telling you for over 4 years, the white Democrat is your enemy. How many times do I have to prove it? Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Let's see. All right, we more or less at the 2-hour mark of this thing. We're gonna wrap this on up. Like to thank everybody who participated in the stream today. Shout out to JC the Conqueror, did become a $5 Patreon. Shout out to Beretta, who I was actually hoping that you would come up. I should have put the link in the chat earlier. You sent like $40 worth of super chats, voicing some disagreements with some things that Hood Conservative said, and some things I said too, I believe. And yeah, I would have loved to hear from you. Would have loved to hear from you on the panel. But all right. But either way, shout out to everybody in the building. Appreciate each and every one of you. And last but not least, before I make my way up out of here, special shout out and acknowledgement to Machismo TV.
Welcome to Machismo TV, the ultimate destination for modern men seeking to upgrade their lifestyle. Subscribe to Machismo TV and Saul T-Balls. We stream daily from 12 midnight to 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the best male-centric content. Highlight reels without reviewing or providing any editorial bias to the content. We have done so much, with so little for so long, we are now qualified to do anything, with nothing.
Oh, and I'll be remiss if I didn't point out one more game before the show ends. This is how Florida wants to teach slavery.
I said your name is Toby. Kunta Kinte. Damn! Steve! What'd I say about hitting so hard, man? I'm sorry, are you all right? You sorry? I'm gonna show you sorry, man. I'm gonna show you sorry, bro.
All right, just had to get that one in. Had to get that one in one more time for the road. But all right. Shout out to everybody in there. Make sure you go and subscribe to Machismo TV. Make sure you go subscribe to Machismo TV. We've done so much with so little for so long. We're not qualified to do anything with nothing. Make sure you go subscribe to that best male-centric clips channel and highlight reel on the internet. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Peace. We gone.